Rev up your engine! Today I'm going to show you how to fix your car when it's vibrating, when it's idling like this. Now theoretically there are many reasons a car can vibrate and idle. It could be out of tune, it could have dirty fuel injectors, it could have a clogged air filter, could have all kinds of things, but this Focus runs perfectly fine otherwise. It's just when it's sitting there idling in drive or park, it shakes a lot. I'm going to show you how you can check the most common reason they shake at idle, especially in a Ford. We'll open the hood and we're going to check the motor mounts. The motor mounts are rubber inside and metal on the outside. They hold the motor to the frame. Now originally when they built cars, the motors were just bolted to the frame, but metal on metal, they would vibrate like mad. So soon after the early cars, they used rubber motor mounts that have metal exterior that bolt to the motor and to the frame of the car. Outside, the metal part holds onto the engine, and the metal part also holds onto the frame of the car, where the rubber gives insulation, so they don't vibrate or make much noise from the engine shaking. But this car is kind of a squirrely design. Many car manufacturers, including Ford, decided we're going to make what are called hydraulic motor mounts. The motor mounts are rubber, but inside they're hollow, and there's hydraulic fluid that dampens all the vibrations a little bit better than rubber, which is a great idea on paper. But in the real world, it's a stupid idea, because the rubber is then thinner, it's hollow inside with hydraulic fluid. And guess what happens? Vibration, the rubber rips, then the hydraulic fluid leaks out, and then they really vibrate like mad. Because you need a thick motor mount to take all that dampening. If it's just thin rubber that's hollow inside, it'll vibrate like mad. And that's exactly what this thing is doing. So I'm going to show you how to check a motor mount on your car. And all you really need is a piece of wood and a jack. Now you put the piece of wood on the jack part that jacks up on a pivot because you don't want to bend anything. Then you push it under the car, under the motor, and it goes. Then line it up onto the motor and jack it up in the air. Up it goes. As we jack it, we want to see if this motor mount's broken. We'll jack it up. Now on a normal motor mount, you'll see the rubber will separate and split, and you'll see a big hole. You know the motor mount was bad. Now this isn't ripped and there's no big hole, but check this out. When we look under the car, what do we see? A bunch of dirty fluid. And what is it? Well, I've been dealing with dirty fluids my whole life. I can smell it. It is hydraulic fluid. And what did I say about these bad motor mounts on these Fords? They are motor mounts that are rubber but filled with hydraulic fluid. When we get a flashlight and look in there, we can see where's the fluid coming from? It's coming from right here. It's the motor mount and it's dripping all the way down. So this Ford needs a new motor mount there. Even though it's only got, let's see how many miles it has, 30,000 miles on it. Can anyone say horrendous design? Yes, they can. It is a horrendous design. And what can you do about it? Well, you're gonna have to replace the mount. But you don't have to buy this crappy Ford hydraulic fluid filled mount. You can get an aftermarket mount that's made out of solid rubber that will last 10 times longer. Check out my 94 Celica with 240,000 miles. It has solid rubber motor mounts and transmission mounts down here. They're solid rubber. 240,000 miles later, they're still intact. Work perfectly fine. They can be built fine. This idea of putting hydraulic fluid in them, yes, they idle a tiny bit smoother until they break at low mileage, then they shake like mad. Now thank goodness on this Focus, it's a pretty simple job. It's got bolts here, bolt there, bolt down there. It's a pretty simple job to replace that mount. And if you do buy an aftermarket motor mount that's solid rubber, you'll probably never ever have to do it again. But me, I'd rather buy a car with a better design that went 240,000 miles and they never had to be touched. To me, that's a better design than these stupid hydraulic filled motor mounts. Engineers, listen to Scotty. Stop this garbage. Now, as if this isn't bad enough, years ago I was working on a customer's Cadillac and it had the motor mounts on each side of the engine because it was rear wheel drive. They were 1/4 of an inch from the red hot exhaust manifold. They didn't last 20,000 miles before they went out, and they were very expensive to replace. So this Ford design isn't as bad as it could be. The motor mount is far away from the exhaust. It's way over there. So it's just They didn't make them all that well, and the heat and the vibration eventually just made it rip and the fluid leaked out. So the next time your car starts shaking at idle, now you know how you can check the motor mounts out yourself. As you can see, it's a very simple process that you can quickly do when you got a little spare time. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Now here's a really good question. Ryan, Minnesota says, should I do a bunch of preventive maintenance or is it a waste? I got a 2010 Yukon with 175,000 miles. I was thinking about replacing the belt, starter, plugs, alternator, battery, pulleys because of the age. Some of it is good and some of it might not be such a good idea. Belts are made out of rubber. Change them. Spark plugs. Change them. Battery, get it load tested. All auto parts stores do it free. If it's still got, 60, 70% of its life, don't waste your money. If it's 20%, change it now. Now here comes the rub. Starters or alternators, most of the time, if you buy a starter or an alternator, it's going to be remanufactured. It's a broken one that's been repaired that may not last that long. You got an original equipment one, starter or alternator in your vehicle, it might last forever. In that case, it's sort of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the way I feel about that. Because if you were to buy an OEM starter or an OEM alternator brand new, they cost a small fortune. And if you get a remanufactured one, like I say, it's a broken one that's been fixed. If you are worried, go ahead, If some cases they're not that hard to change, you might just buy a remanufactured one and stick it in the trunk. If it breaks, put it on. I used to do that with my Ford Maverick because they always went out. I had a spare starter and alternator in the trunk. When they finally went out, I changed them out. It'd take 5 minutes. Then I'd buy another rebuilt one, put it in the trunk, and years later I'd put that in. But I wouldn't change them if they're working out now because you never know how they're going to last. And they are mainly rebuilt. And the new ones, they were brand new, and if they're still working, what the heck? Dad 2 Parts says, Scotty, 2013 Jeep Grand Cherokee Hemi V8, installing new plug, Autolite, Iridium. Once again, the internet's all over. Do I need NICs or not? You don't need NICs. The modern plugs already have the coating built in them, especially the Iridium plugs. When I was young, they had no coating and they could rust on. So we'd put a little anti-seize on them and put them on, or any kind of electrolyte solution that keeps them from corroding. But modern ones, they're all already coated, so you don't. And here's the rub. If you did put some kind of anti-seize on it, it would mess with the torque setting when you torqued them on, and they could actually come loose and blow out, like some of those Ford V8s had plugs blowing out on them. You don't, with the modern ones, want to put anything on the spark plugs, the new ones, because they already have either the coating or they're plated with chrome plating or copper plating. They're plated and they don't need anything on it. So it's actually an adverse thing if you put them on modern plugs because they could get loose. They might not get in tight enough if you put an extra coating on because there's already a coating on them when you buy them. Miko Dongman says, Scotty, I just purchased a 2011 Toyota Sienna all-wheel drive with 191,000 miles for $1,500. Transmission got replaced with a rebuilt. When I heard humming, they said it's a transfer case. Changed the fluid, and he said there was hardly anything in it. Is it still worth it to rebuild it, like the mechanic suggests? Well, yeah, if he changed it, he said hardly anything came out. It's damaged from lack of lubrication. The previous owner did no maintenance. You got to decide. You're probably going to spend a small fortune having it rebuilt. If he could find a used one, maybe. See how much money he's going to charge. I mean, you only paid $1,500 for it. If he can rebuild it for another $1,500 or something, maybe worthwhile to do. But if it's going to cost a small fortune, try a used one. Or he filled it with fluid. If it's not leaking and it hums and it still runs, it's a Toyota. I've seen them hum for years and they still run down the road. So what the heck? You got a humming car, but it runs? Who really cares? You only paid $1,500 for it, and they're pretty solid made. If it hums but it still goes, what the heck? MooX27 says, are there any decent years Kia Souls worth buying? As I've said, and many others have, you're much better buying a Toyota or a Honda. The Kias have a lot lower resale value. You can get them a lot cheaper. Now, a Kia isn't going to go 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles in most cases without having a lot of problems, where the Hondas and Toyotas can. On the flip side, you can get them used a lot cheaper. If you could find a Kia Soul, say it's got 60,000, 70,000 miles, it might be pretty trouble-free till it hit 120 or something like that. If you can find a low enough mileage one that's in good shape, you could save a lot of money. If you're the type of guy that you aren't going to put 200,000, 300,000 miles on, or you get bored with the vehicles and get rid of them every 4 or 5 years, you might look at a Kia. But if you want long life and all that stuff, you're better off getting a Honda or a Toyota. They're much better made vehicles. But if you can find one out there that's cheap enough, what the heck? You never know what you're going to find out when it comes to money for what you get. Because you're never going to find a really good, cheap Toyota or Honda SUV. That's not going to happen. They have too high resale value, and everybody knows they're great cars. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, Remember to ring that bell.